So I'm going to make this video on the idea people have that the 144K have to be literal virgins. Okay, this is not actually what Scripture is saying, and I'm going to explain how it's actually a spiritual idea of virginity, which is that you are a born-again believer, follower of Yeshua, you're faithful to Him, right, and you're not going after other gods and therefore committing whoredom or adultery against Him. Okay, so that's what it means. You're not defiled with the great whore of Babylon, right? So I'm going to start here in Revelation chapter 14 just to go over some of these attributes of the 144,000. Then I'm going to show some other spots in scriptures to show some connections and compare some idioms to make it clear that they do not have to be literal virgins. They're key of David holders, right? They know about the 3-day sexual fast. They're not defiled with the great whore. That is what it's talking about. So Revelation chapter 14, verses 1 to 5. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads. Right? So they have the name of Yah written on their foreheads. They know his name. Isaiah 52, my people will know my name. Right? And they're coming back with the Lamb, with Yeshua, to execute judgment upon the heathen, upon the nations, because they're going to war. So this idea that they're literal young boys, right, that aren't even 20 years old, right, they're literal virgins there, well, that isn't what it's talking about, because they're going to war. And if you look at Numbers, the age of war was 20. That's how old you had to be. And I'll get a little bit more into that later. But it's just a nonsensical idea that they're these literal children, right? And sometimes I'll even hear people say that they were the kids who were killed by Herod in first century Judea, which doesn't make sense for a number of reasons, right? Doesn't understand that there's 2 houses of Israel and not all 12 tribes are Jewish. But I'll just keep going here because those are all points I'll get into more later. But verse 2, and I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder, and I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung as it were a new song, the new song of Moses, before the throne and before the 4 beasts, and the elders, and no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. Okay, so people look at that and they take it literally. But Paul says don't go by the letter of the law, and Christians are really making the same mistake as the Jews by going by the letter of the New Testament. You're looking at the carnal, the literal meaning, instead of going by the spiritual application. So it's not talking about literal virginity, but they're not defiled with the great whore of Babylon. Okay, just having sex with a woman is not something that defiles you unless you're committing adultery against another man and his wife, right? So they were redeemed from among, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb, and they were even caught up to the throne before the 6th seal happens, the Great Tribulation, or they will be caught up to the throne before that happens. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. Right? So they're the only people without deceit, without lies coming out of their mouth, because they're the only people not deceived. They're the same group in Matthew 24, verse 24, the very elect, the only people in the last days not deceived by Satan and his angels, because God's Spirit of truth prevents them from being deceived. But you're not going to get the Spirit of truth if you won't obey the 10 commandments. Right? And the whole world is breaking the 10 commandments with these whoredoms against God. Christmas and Easter and Sun God Day and several other like things that is basically paganism, and God abhors it, right? And the whore of Babylon, they are spreading this everywhere that they go. So that's why these 144K are set apart. They are holy. They are not like the rest of the world. The portion of Jacob is not like the world. Right, so now I just want to show a really clear example of another place where virgins is not literal. Matthew 25, verses 1 to 4. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. They that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. Right? So obviously these aren't literal virgins, right? But people don't seem to remember this when you look at the 144K being virgins. So there you go, another example where it's not literal. It's these people that are about to be espoused to the Messiah because they're born again. So even if they did paganism like Christmas and Easter in their past, they've come out of that. They're no longer in the ways of the world, learning the ways of Babylon and their sorceries that they spread to all nations, but they are now born again. Okay? So Exodus chapter 34, I'm going to go through a few Old Testament examples to really make it clear about this idiom of being a whore or committing adultery against God, which is idolatry, right? So idolatry is spiritual adultery against God. So Exodus 34, verses 11 to 16, observe thou that which I command thee this day. Behold, I drive out before thee the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land whither thou goest, lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee. But ye shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves, for thou shalt worship no other God. For Jehovah, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Right? So this is the same thing as Deuteronomy 12. Utterly destroy the idolatry of the heathen. Do not use any part of it in the worship for the God of Israel, because that is committing adultery against him. You're not serving him if you use these pagan customs like putting up a Christmas tree and painting eggs. You're serving the gods of the heathen. That is not how God is worshipped. Verse 15, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a-whoring after their gods, and do sacrifice unto their gods, and one call thee, and thou eat of his sacrifice. And thou take of their daughters unto thy sons, and their daughters go a-whoring after their gods, and make thy sons go a-whoring after their gods. So it's establishing this idiom that whoring after other gods, well, that's committing adultery against God, and he gets jealous when you do that. So this is the number one thing you cannot do. You cannot worship other gods as a believer in the Messiah and the God of Israel. Okay, so further establishes that idiom in Leviticus chapter 17, verses 3 to 7. What man soever there be of the house of Israel that killeth an ox or lamb or goat in the camp, or that killeth it out of the camp, and bringeth it not unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, to offer an offering unto Jehovah before the tabernacle of Jehovah, blood shall be imputed unto that man. He hath shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among his people, to the end that the children of Israel may bring their sacrifices which they offer in the open field, even that they may bring them unto Jehovah, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, unto the priest, and offer them for peace offerings unto Jehovah. And the priest shall sprinkle the blood upon the altar of Jehovah at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and burn the fat for a sweet savour unto Jehovah. And they shall no more offer their sacrifices unto devils, after whom they have gone a-whoring. This shall be a statute forever unto them throughout their generations. Right? So you're going whoring after other gods when you eat their sacrifices, when you eat the sacrifices of devils. This is why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10, you cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. You cannot do these pagan feast days like Christmas and Easter. So this is again just showing the idiom. When you're participating in those pagan customs, you're whoring, you're being a whore, and you're going after other gods. You're committing adultery. So this is the idiom that it's talking about with the 144,000. They aren't literal virgins, but they are people that have been redeemed, right, from the pollutions of this world, and they are no longer whoring after gods that are not the God of Israel. Okay, and this is a really clear one, and this one also establishes the difference between the two houses. Okay, so Jeremiah chapter 3, verses 6 to 15 says, Jehovah said also unto me in the days of Josiah the king, Hast thou seen that which backsliding Israel hath done? She is gone up upon every high mountain, under every green tree, your Christmas trees, and there hath played the harlot. You have all your idols under every green tree, your covetous possessions, right? Because covetousness is idolatry, and you're teaching that to your kids as well, passing them through the fires of Molech spiritually. Verse 7, And I said after she had done all these things, Turn thou unto me, but she returned not, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. Right? So there's a difference between Israel and Judah. This is a big mistake because there are 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, So just saying that they're all Jewish, well, that doesn't work because Judah, that is one tribe. So there's also 11 other tribes that are not from Judah. Verse 8, and I saw when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a bill of divorce, yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. Right? So he puts away Israel because they go after other gods, they commit adultery. This is the only condition in the law that allows for divorce. Right? That's what the Messiah says in Matthew chapter 19. So God is using that clause to put away the northern kingdom of Israel. But then Judah, which is different, you have to understand the difference between the two houses, they are doing the same mistake, right? And that's even how they're allowing Christmas and Easter to be done in their cities in Jerusalem, and they're not destroying it like Deuteronomy chapter 12 says. They're making peace with the nations and allowing their pagan customs to come into them. And it says, do not make a covenant with them, do not make an agreement with them, but that's what they're doing because they fear men and war more than they fear God. All right, and it came to pass through the lightness of her whoredom that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and with stocks. Okay, this isn't literal adultery, but spiritual, because they're worshiping the work of men's hands, right? Stones and stocks, well, they're bowing down to the western wall, the stones, they're putting up the images of the crucifix, right? And stocks, trees, they're putting up the Christmas tree, and they're carving idols out of wood, like the crucifix, statues of Mary. All this stuff is an abomination to God. It's idolatry, and he hates it. And this is why he divorced the northern kingdom of Israel, and why you're not actually grafted back into the commonwealth of Israel unless you put this stuff away first. You can't have two gods. You can't serve two masters, and you're doing that if you're serving the Christmas Jesus guy and all the idolatry associated with his worship, and you're not serving the God of Israel and his son Yeshua. Okay, verse 10, and yet for all this her treacherous sister Judah hath not turned unto me with her whole heart, but feignedly, saith Jehovah. And Jehovah said unto me, the backsliding Israel hath justified herself more than treacherous Judah. Go and proclaim these words towards the north, and say, return, thou backsliding Israel, saith Jehovah, and I will not cause mine anger to fall upon you. So right now his anger is upon you guys. For I am merciful, saith Jehovah, and I will not keep anger forever. Only acknowledge thine iniquity, that thou hast transgressed against Jehovah thy God, and hast scattered thy ways to the strangers under every green tree, and ye have not obeyed my voice, saith Jehovah. Right? So they're scattering their ways even to the strangers under every green tree. And this is what Mystery Babylon is doing. USA. They're spreading their whoredoms, right? Their sorceries, Christmas and Easter, to every nation they preach the gospel. That's how it spread. That's how these pagan customs that they would have never done before, right, came to be done in Africa or Asia, right? They're doing Christmas because you guys have spread that to them. You didn't preach the true gospel, which is the refreshing of the covenant. You didn't teach them to obey God's voice, right, which spoke the 10 Commandments and added no more. You taught them to break the 10 Commandments and to do lawlessness and paganism. And that's why God's wrath is upon you. You won't repent from this stuff either. You refuse. You dig your heels in the sand. This is why you guys are going into tribulation. You're cut off from God, and you're going to hell if you won't repent in tribulation. Verse 14, turn, O backsliding children, saith Jehovah, for I am married unto you, because this is speaking prophetically about the last days when Yeshua had already died on the cross, and he is telling them, come back to me, right? He took the punishment for being cut off. Now you guys just need to turn back to the Holy Covenant because he came to refresh the covenant at Horeb, the 10 Commandments. And I will take you one of a city and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion. And I will give you pastors according to mine heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. Right? And this means that they do not currently have pastors doing this. Right now they have the Jeremiah 23 pastors who are scattering the flock, teaching smooth, ear-tickling words instead of the truth, which would turn people from their evil ways. Right? They just want to hear smooth things. Prophesied deceits, they say, Isaiah chapter 30. So right now we have wicked pastors, Ezekiel 34, evil shepherds feeding themselves with their covetous desires instead of feeding the flock the true judgments of God, right? And that's why God's wrath is coming upon this land, United States, Mystery Babylon. They are not chaste virgins that we are to be towards Christ, but they are being whores, going after other gods. All right, so now I want to go to Ephesians chapter 2. And just to show, because people don't seem to understand that we are supposed to be grafted into the commonwealth of Israel as believers in the Messiah. We're not supposed to just be Gentiles learning the ways of the heathen. That's even what Gentile means. It means heathen in the Greek language. It's the same word. So you're calling yourself a heathen when you're saying, oh, that stuff is just for the Jews. We're Gentiles. We don't need to keep the Sabbath day. We don't need to refrain from eating pork. We can do Christmas for the Lord, right? That type of mindset is a Gentile mindset. That is someone who is divorced from God, cut off. You're without hope. This is what it says in Ephesians chapter 2. Verse 11, wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. So you're just being called uncircumcised by Jewish people. But in the flesh you were Gentiles in time past, that at that time ye were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope, and without God in the world. But now, in Messiah Yeshua, ye who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Christ. Right? So you're made nigh, you're brought in to the house of Israel. You're no longer a stranger if you enter into the covenants of promise and believe in Yeshua and what he said. And you do it as well. Verse 19, now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God. Right? So something people don't understand is that because the two kingdoms were divided, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, the northern kingdom was scattered into all nations by the Assyrian Empire after a long enough time. And now God's people are all over the world, right? So the house of Israel is really talking about the Christian church here, because they're all over, and it's the people that God's grace is bringing to the truth, but they just lack knowledge, right? They have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. He's slowly bringing them to the truth, and then his watchmen are helping them to get all the way onto the narrow path. But his people are all over the world, and that's even why his blessing of entering into the covenant and being saved is given to all nations now, because his people were scattered into all nations. Because anybody can be saved. His people are now Gentiles, so now Gentiles can be saved also, right? So we're no longer strangers, but we're fellow citizens with the saints. We're no longer Gentiles, but we're grafted into Israel by the Spirit. This is why Paul says in Galatians 3:29, if ye be Christ's, then are ye Abraham's seed, and heirs according to the promise. Okay, so this is why the 144K aren't just literal Jewish people, but they're from all 12 tribes, which were scattered into all nations. So God's saints, his 144,000, they're going to be from all nations. Okay, verse 20, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Yeshua Messiah himself being the chief cornerstone. I just wanted to include that because some people say, oh, we're not grafted into Israel, we're grafted into Jesus. But no, the Messiah, Yeshua, he is the chief cornerstone. He is part of the house of Israel too. He's just the foundation stone, right? The stone that the builders rejected, right? So he's part of it too, but then we're grafted into that same house by his sacrifice. Okay, so now I want to go to 2 Corinthians 11, verse 2, for I am jealous over you with godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. So very plain and simple, he's calling these saints at Corinth a chaste virgin to be presented to Christ. Does that mean they're literal virgins? No, of course not. He's saying that they're born again. They're no longer defiled with the idols of the nations. Revelation chapter 21, verses 1 to 2, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Right? So this bride, it's the 144K. It's the saints, right? These are the ones who marry the husband, the Lamb. So this just shows, another example of this idiom of being married to the Messiah. So if you go after other gods, you're not a chaste virgin, you're a harlot that is whoring after other gods. So that's even the whole idea there with the the wedding feast at the end of Revelation. It's a covenant. It's a wedding covenant, and you have those 10 vows, those 10 commandments, and if you break them, you are unfaithful. So don't think you're getting into the kingdom without works, because you need to obey those 10 words of the covenant, or you're not faithful. Okay, Jeremiah chapter 51, verses 17 to 24. Okay, and this is going to get into the idea that they are, literal kids, which is ridiculous, okay, because they're going to war, right? Jeremiah 51, it talks about the portion of Jacob, and Jacob is just another name for Israel, but Jacob specifically is the servant, right? The saints, the 144K, and this is what it says about them. It says, every man is brutish by his knowledge, every founder is confounded by the graven image, for his molten image is falsehood, and there is no breath in them. Right? This is even the same thing that is quoted in Jeremiah chapter 10 as well, and it's talking about learning not the ways of the heathen, like Christmas, right? Because the whole world lies in wickedness. They're all doing idolatry like Christmas, but then the portion of Jacob, they are different. They're set apart. They're holy. Verse 18, they are vanity, the work of errors. In the time of their visitation they shall perish. Then this is the key point. Verse 19, the portion of Jacob, the servants, is not like them, for he is the former of all things, and Israel is the rod of his inheritance. Jehovah of hosts is his name. And this is what he says about Jacob. Thou art my battle axe and weapons of war, for with thee will I break in pieces the nations, and with thee will I destroy kingdoms. Right? They're going to have a rod of iron, just like Yeshua has a rod of iron. Psalm chapter 2, Revelation chapter 2, they're going to break it in pieces. These people, right, these wicked, disobedient, evil servants who go whoring after other gods, or, just are unfaithful in other ways. And this is even judgment against Babylon, USA, the great, where the great whore resides. Thou art my battle, I just read that one. Verse 21, and with thee will I break in pieces the horse and his rider, with thee will I break in pieces the chariot and his rider. With thee also will I break in pieces man and woman, and with thee will I break in pieces old and young, and with thee will I break in pieces the young man and the maid. I will also break in pieces with thee the shepherd and his flock, and with thee will I break in pieces the husbandman and his yoke of oxen, and with thee will I break in pieces captains and rulers. And I will render unto Babylon, USA, and to all the inhabitants of Chaldea all their evil that they have done in Zion, in your sight, saith Jehovah. Right? So that's who he's going to punish with his 144,000. He's going to break them with his battle axe Jacob, and they have a rod of iron. So to say that this is kids doesn't make any sense, because in Numbers chapter 1, I'm going to read a little bit here, verses 1 to 3. And Jehovah spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tabernacle of the congregation, on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel, after their families, by the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their polls, from 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth in Israel, to war in Israel, thou and Aaron shall number them by their armies. Right? And then verse 18, and they assembled all the congregation together on the first day of the second month. They declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names, from 20 years old and upward, by their polls. Right? So going to war, you have to be at least 20. So the 144,000, they are going to be at least 20 years old. So it's not literal virgin boys who were killed by Herod in the first century, which is completely ridiculous, but it is men who are caught up to the throne before the sixth seal, and they are going to war, and they are going to destroy kingdoms with Yeshua. They're going to execute judgment upon the heathen, upon the nations. Right? And I want to go into that some more. So Jude, chapter 1, verses 14 to 15, I'm going to give a few examples to show that the 144,000 go to war with the Messiah to basically judge the world. So Jude 1 verses 14-15, and Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints. Right? 10,000s, maybe 144,000. To execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Right? So they're executing judgment upon the ungodly people of the world. Psalm 149 says the same thing. Verse 5, let the saints be joyful in glory. Let them sing aloud upon their beds. Let the high praises of God be in their mouth and a two-edged sword in their hand to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishments upon the people, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron, to execute upon them the judgment written. This honor have all his saints. Praise ye Jehovah. Right? So the saints are going to judge the world. And this is what Paul also says. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Verse 1, dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unjust and not before the saints? Do ye not know that the saints shall judge the world? And if the world be judged by you, are ye unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life? If then ye have judgments of things pertaining to this life, set them to judge who are least esteemed in the church. Right? So this really throws the whole don't judge idea out of the water, because he's telling you that the saints are going to judge the world. Of course, they have the ability to judge matters and disputes within the body of Christ, so don't go to law with your brethren. But, it's telling you that the saints are going to judge the world. So this can't be literal children. It's people going to war. Right? And then one more piece of evidence that just shows that it can't be people just from the first century. When we look at Revelation chapter 7, it shows that they're not all sealed until right before the Great Tribulation or the sixth seal occurs, okay, which hasn't even happened yet. So how can they already have been people from Herod's time? So Revelation chapter 7, verse 2, and I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the four angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Right? And we know that anybody can be grafted into the Commonwealth of Israel. So it doesn't need to be literal Jewish people. It's people from all 12 tribes, which were scattered into every kingdom under heaven. This is even what Deuteronomy 28 and Jeremiah 15 prophesied of. So it's going to be people who this number isn't even going to be fulfilled until right before the Great Tribulation comes in the last days. So yeah, again, it can't be people from just the first century. Definitely not literal virgin boys that were killed by Herod. So no, the 144K, they're not literal virgins. They're born again virgins spiritually who are grafted into the Commonwealth of Israel. They're no longer divorced by God, but they've been grafted back in by the Messiah's sacrifice. They believe in Yeshua. They have the name of Yah written on their foreheads, right? They're not deceived. They have no guile because they have the spirit of truth. They're coming to execute vengeance upon the nations, right? So this is really a number you want to be trying to reach, because this is the higher calling. These are even the watchmen who are proclaiming God's name until New Jerusalem is a praise on all the earth. So this is the saints in the last days. They're the chaste virgin that we are to be married to with Christ. Or I said that kind of weird, but you get the point. So it's not literal, okay? It's people who are born again. So I hope I got the point across there. You can't be doing pagan idolatry like Christmas and Easter if you want to be one of these saints of God. So repent, keep the 10 Commandments, and warn other people to do the same. That's how you become great in the kingdom of heaven, according to Matthew chapter 5, verse 19. And then come fellowship with us. I have our site in the description. And this is what the 144K also do. They speak often one to another and think upon the name of Jehovah. Malachi chapter 3:16, then they're caught up and they return to judge between the righteous and the wicked. So I'll end it here, but hopefully I got the point across there clearly. With the 144K, they're not literal virgins, but they have the key of David, and they are espoused to one husband, even Messiah, Yeshua.